This is a great point. So this is one of my concerns with some people who try to tie, much like you mentioned, the Vedic texts, like ancient India. Oh, quantum physics. The Vedic said this 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years. I get that comment plenty. I'm actually writing a Substack post about that.
But do you know that even Rovelli, he published in November in that Noema magazine a text, his dialogue with some Veda guy, where they claim, yes, there is a deep spiritual similarity between this Vedantic view of Anatman, Krishna, blah, blah, and quantum. For me, you go to Gulag if you claim this. You know?
A problem with that, there's two problems. One is that there's a similarity between almost anything. So I can find a similarity between my lip balm here and your life history. Okay, so you can abstract anything or generalize anything to find similarities with anything else, but then there's some harm that comes about from trying to harmonize. There are multiple ways of abstracting. In fact, if a mathematician or a physicist ever tells you this object here is the generalization of another object, that's false. There's no such thing as the generalization. There's a generalization. If it was the generalization...
I agree with it, and that's for me the lesson of quantum mechanics, and that's why I don't like this. They themselves sometimes fall into bad generalizations. Like in one of his texts, the ultimate, whatever, about precisely your point, theory of everything, no? Rovelli, I think, comes too close to this. He tries to discern some zero-level quantum oscillations outside time and space and says, this is it, the absolutely ultimate reality. But then when he tries to climb back into our reality, it doesn't work, really.
Remember, I said there were two problems. So one problem is the degeneralization versus a generalization problem. Okay, another problem is that many people tie their religious beliefs to something about quantum mechanics, or maybe something about the Big Bang. If you're a Christian, you say, oh, the Big Bang validates the beginning of the cosmos. But then the problem that I have is...
the old Pope, John Paul II, shouted at Stephen Hawking. He said, your domain is Big Bang. Beyond Big Bang, only we theologians can move. Listen, slowly, I'm losing my time. I'm sorry.
Oh, of course. Basically, what I was going to say is that I'm old-fashioned, and that I think that your faith and your values, much of it should come down to faith. One should be honest about that. If we're tying our religious convictions to quantum mechanics, to some indeterminacy in quantum mechanics, but then let's imagine it turns out, oh, no, it's not indeterministic. There's actually it's super deterministic. Maybe that's actually the case. What if the Big Bang isn't the Big Bang? What if there are eons, like Penrose says? So are you going to then overturn your religious beliefs because they were tied to this, or are you going to find some other way? And so that's the issue, is that, look, you're trying to say, not you. One tries to say that this modern perspective of quantum mechanics validates this Indian text, the Vedantas, whatever. Advaita Vedanta. Okay. And that also assumes that that's all what India is, and they don't talk about Vaita Vedanta, which is dualism. Okay. But then if the modern physics changes and turns out to not validate it, do you then say, okay, I'm going to put less credence now into my religious beliefs? Probably not, because one already had that, and then they're trying to say, look at this fanciness over here validates this.
Yeah, but I totally agree with your point, but I think it gets even more complex. What I, for a long time, thought that we, not scientists, we philosophers, theologists, that we are making this, trying to appropriate it. But what surprises me again and again is how many quantum physicists themselves are searching for some foundation. For example, you know that German guy who got together with some others, Nobel Prize, Zeilinger, I think it's his name. Yeah. But he's friend with Dalai Lama. Yeah, there is a deeper spiritual dimension, and so on and so on. The big enigma is why they themselves are prone to this. They criticize philosophy very much, but then again and again they fall into it. It's a complex.
I subscribe to The Economist. Their science and their AI coverage is among the best I've found anywhere. And I say that as someone who reads plenty of it. I'll give you some examples. They just ran an analysis on how attitudes towards science are changing in American politics and what this means for research and funding in scientific institutions moving forward. This sort of high quality reporting is fantastic. They even covered how dark energy may be weakening over time. Now, if that holds up, it completely changes our understanding of the universe's fate. If you watch this channel, those are exactly the kinds of questions that we explore every week. I subscribe to The Economist because their science and their AI reporting regularly surprises me with how deep it goes. And they're also, of course, known for global affairs, both political and economic reporting. They are top tier, and interestingly and flatteringly, TOE is one of the only podcasts that The Economist partners with. So as a listener, you get an exclusive 35% off. That's not a deal that they have just anywhere. Head to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for 35% off. So look, one line of thinking, and this comes from Ian McGilchrist, it's his perspective on this, is that we have two modes, broadly speaking. These are generalizations. One of generalizations, that's one of the modes. So abstraction, and then another of uniqueness. And interestingly, the abstract one is the one that has racism in it because it sees you as the same as someone else of your race and it doesn't distinguish between. Whereas the right mode, as he calls it, the right versus left, it doesn't morphologically matter. But the right mode is the one that sees distinctness and uniqueness, and this situation is different. This one has context. The left mode is the one that sees abstractions and generalizations. Now, this left mode is, again, broadly speaking, what the mathematicians and the physicists tend to be engaged in, the min-maxed towards on the max end. You'll notice that the interpretations that, again, broadly speaking, this itself is its own generalization. So that's why I even loathe to say it, but I'm giving an Ian McGilchrist perspective, is that what they resonate with, broadly speaking, are those bastardizations of the East that comes from the New Age. So they see that as a sort of true East, like to go back to this true. But the true East is quite varied. And the ideas they have of the soul is sometimes they have ideas that there is a reality to the soul that doesn't just ultimately go to Brahman where one is, or Atman where one is the same as it. And that there's a reality of the other. There's realness that's not just coming down to non-distinctness. There's a genuine belief in free will in many of these other interpretations. There's also a genuine belief that you have to not consume psychedelics, for instance, or drugs in general, that you have to act right. And that acting right is even prior to the meditation. So many people think they meditate themselves to the insight, but in many of these other sects or interpretations, you have to act right first. You have to meditate as well, yes. But it's both in conjunction and anyhow, this all gets molded in the West into thinking the core of the East is some kind of single relativistic, non-dualistic-ness, what have you, but that's false. That's just one strain of it.
Here you touched, I'm so sorry we don't have time, here you touched a crucial point. Because although, except for my quantum Hegelian view, I have infinite respect for Buddhism, But first, all the ethical ambiguities of Buddhism. On the one hand, you have this, bodhisattva, no suffering, blah, blah. At the same time, Buddhism excelled in justifying brutal war. There is a wonderful book called Buddhism at War, forgot the name of the author, which goes in detail how the entire Japanese Zen Buddhist community justified in Buddhist terms brutal killing, claiming if you remain caught in false bodily humanity, let's say we are opposing side on a battlefield. I have a knife. My duty is to stick my knife into your eye, mouth, whatever. Since I hope so, relatively decent man, I would find problems. Zen Buddhist solution, because you are still caught into your false ego. If you go through Satori, Nirvana experience, you see that there is no substantial reality, just phenomena freely floating. And in this free float, my knife somehow hits your eye, and I am absolved of all responsibility and so on. You know, but nonetheless, in spite of all this, my second choice is Buddhism. You know what's only the problem of Buddhism? It will sound horrible. Yes, nirvana is an authentic experience, but I never found in Buddhism a good explanation of why did we fall from nirvana into our vulgar reality. I think the fall
Interesting.
comes first. That's my focus.
So I spoke to Wolfgang Smith. I know we both have to get going. I spoke to Wolfgang Smith, who studied in India and actually then became a Catholic. And he said, we read Buddhist texts and we are mind blown about how interesting they are, mystical they are, and so forth. And we wonder, do they ever read our texts and think that, oh, this is an interesting idea? And he said, there is one respect, that there's something in Christianity that's not captured in the East, and that is the idea of the fall. They don't have an idea of the fall.
And that's my idea. And Hegel, I follow here. You know what Hegel says? Hegel says paradise was nothing. It's a retroactive dream. Fall means humanity. And the specific idea of Christianity is for me that the fall itself creates retroactively what it is the fall from. That's what I don't quite find. Sorry, I have to run, but listen, at some point in the future, it would be wonderful to repeat it, not with politics, I agree with you, but maybe with all this theology, Buddhism, and so on, because I agree with you, I do have an infinite respect for Buddhism, but there is nonetheless some kind of ambiguity in it. You know, you can push it in the direction of infinite respect for life, but you can also push it in the direction of this indifference, in the sense of all is just appearance and so on. So
I know you have to get going, but I want to agree with you in less than a minute. Okay, so many people like Neil deGrasse Tyson will say that if you take a look at the moon, or from a perspective of the moon, you look at the Earth and you say, wasn't it so foolish that we wasted all that bloodshed on war and so forth? Okay, yes, I could take that perspective. I could also take the perspective of the person from Jupiter looking at the person on the moon saying, isn't it so foolish that you care that we cared that we had bloodshed and so forth, and that all of it doesn't matter?
But this is for me quantum view in a metaphorical sense, only if you add, there is no global divine view which sees it all, which can locate all these experiences into a kind of harmonious totality.